Above the chronoshell, the void shimmered with false motion. Countless fragments, ships, drones, shattered stations hung motionless, suspended in a borderless halo around Orpha 7. Each object bore the scars of desperate entry attempts, carbon scoring, punctured hulls, twisted comm arrays. No light passed between them. Even the stars appeared frozen, held in perfect, silent recoil. Some wrecks bore sigils from the old Terran crusade, long erased from galactic records. Others were unmistakably alien, tapered vessels with crystalline skin, elongated like blade fish and covered in biosynthetic armor that had begun decomposing mid-orbit. A few bore static field burns, the telltale sign of temporal inversion. Every attempt to penetrate the anomaly had failed. Orpha 7 had become a graveyard outside time. The Cavister emerged slowly from the drop tunnel, her aging frame groaning under gravitational tension. Copper panels flared under the heat of displacement burn, steam venting in glacial plumes along her flanks. She was a relic converted from a planetary ice cutter into a long-range recon ship during the last Earth Union collapse. Her hull carried the paint scars of 3 civil wars and 6 salvage owners. Its underbelly still bore remnants of ancient slogans, no future but the one we steal, barely legible beneath scorch marks. Now, she was the only ship in 1,000 light-years to approach the time well and survive the first second. Inside, silence was absolute. The crew didn't speak. They watched. Beyond the armored viewport, Orpha 7 loomed, a planet wrapped in slow-fire twilight. Its atmosphere shimmered like oil under static light. A chain of storms, identical in size and placement to old Earth cartography maps, coiled across the northern hemisphere, never shifting. Continents bore no erosion. Rivers didn't flow. Clouds hung mid-roll like painted brushstrokes. The planet spun, or seemed to, though no axial rotation registered on instruments. It had mass, but its gravity field fluctuated subtly every few seconds. Time, as measured from orbit, was fractured. A loop. No two measurements aligned. The ship's chronometers had already drifted by several nanoseconds since arrival, forcing manual resets every 30 seconds. Commander Elira Voss remained strapped in, eyes locked forward. Her face, angular and sharp under faded flight tattoos, remained unreadable. A thin strand of blood ran from her left nostril where the drop had hit her wrong, curling toward her jawline. She didn't wipe it. Her neural stabilizer, twin rods protruding from the back of her neck like synthetic vertebrae, vibrated faintly, releasing pulses designed to dampen temporal interference. She had seen things like this before. Not this exact phenomena, but precursors, static loops in the Centauri ruins, the pulse-lag tunnels of Ganymede's ice spire, the reverse death of the 8th Martian recon team. Orpha 7 was worse. This was not a broken stream of time. This was time sealed inside a jar. She blinked, and for a split second, the bridge shimmered. The past bled in an old Earth hospital ward, the ceiling flickering with surgical lights, her brother screaming against the harness as a time fracture dissolved the lower half of his body. Gone instantly. She inhaled sharply and forced the memory down. Behind her, Ram Idris stood with his hands laced behind his back. He hadn't strapped in for the drop. His posture hadn't changed since atmospheric contact. The physicist's eyes scanned the sensor readouts along the port wall, not for anomalies, they were constant, but for patterns of failure. He carried a personal recorder in his coat pocket, ancient by modern standards. Tape-based. Analog. Immune to nonlinear bleed. He rotated the cap of a small canister between his fingers, a habit. Inside it, a soil sample from the Chronovault test site. He had carried it since Europa. Not for study. For memory. A reminder of what they buried and what refused to stay buried. The man had once led humanity's Chronovault initiative. He'd vanished from public records after the project was shuttered following a containment failure in the G-class rift. Rumor had it he'd been one of only 2 survivors. Seeing him here meant this mission wasn't just exploration. It was reckoning. Time index drift minimal, he muttered. No one replied. Not yet. The crew of 7 remained at their stations, each face bearing the glassy, inward look of minds clutching old anchors. They'd been briefed. They'd seen the ruins of the last probe that made it halfway in, its AI babbling paradoxes until its own black box melted down. This was not first contact. It was final contact. Wick moved first. The bipedal drone detached from its station near the aft wall, servos whispering as it crossed the deck. Its carapace bore a stylized flame symbol, Unit 7, 7th of its line, burned and rebuilt on Titan's surface. Wick's design was old Earth mil-spec, refitted for deep anomaly insertion. Its joints flexed too quietly, and its eyes, twin blue discs, glowed faintly even in the dim emergency lights. It paused at the viewport, long limbs folding inward. Without command, it began to hum. Not sound. Vibration. Low-frequency oscillations that resonated through the hull. "Wick is sinking," Elira said at last, voice ragged from the drop. Rom checked the resonance log. Patterns had begun to appear, mathematical loops that almost mirrored Gregorian chant structures. Repeating. Perfect. Impossible. The drone wasn't interpreting the orbiting debris. It was remembering it. "Are you picking up loopback?" Rom asked. Elira nodded. "Second-tier audio? Nonverbal. We're already inside its influence." They hadn't crossed the shell yet. Outside, a derelict alien skiff, long, crescent-shaped, covered in algae-like mineral growth, floated within arm's reach. Its bow split open, revealing that its pilot had ejected mid-failure. There was no sign of the escape pod. Nothing ever exited the field. Beyond it, a more haunting image drifted into view, a mirror copy of a Terran exploration vessel, designation K2, lost 93 years ago. It appeared whole, undamaged. But through the viewport, shadowy movement could be seen, slivers of crew frozen mid-action, locked in motionless desperation. Wick raised one arm. It etched a symbol into the viewport's frost with the tip of its finger. Not human. Not alien. A hybrid glyph, a sequence Rom had seen once before, buried in a black site data vault beneath the Europa Deep Assembly. That vault had been sealed after a temporal feedback loop consumed the research team. The crew watched the drone silently. No one spoke of the implications. Elira unbuckled her harness. "Prepare the capsule. We're going through." The helmsman turned to protest. She didn't look at him. "This is a recon op. No arguments." They moved. The descent capsule detached 5 minutes later, a needle-shaped coffin lined with internal dampeners and blackout foam. Its guidance was purely inertial, no systems capable of receiving or transmitting from inside the chronoshell. Elira, Rom, and Wick entered. No ceremony. No farewell. Just silence as the airlock closed with a deep thump that echoed too long. Inside, Rom powered the analog loggers. Wick continued humming. Elira secured her harness and checked the stabilizer spine locked into her vertebrae, one final adjustment. Something flickered in the corner of her eye. The console screen flashed with old mission data, her Martian deployment file from 20 years ago. It was gone before she could react. "Temporal ghosts," Rom said, not looking up. "The shell's already touching us." The capsule fell. It passed through the still orbit where wreckage floated like relics in an invisible shrine. Hulls from alien races long extinct. Probes designed by species the galaxy had never catalogued. A Terran memorial beacon drifted past, still pinging an outdated Earth Union distress code. Its lights flickered in rhythm with Wick's hum as though the two were syncing. Then, light shifted. Not dimmed, reversed. Photons unwound. The capsule interior brightened slightly, then flickered as though memory itself were hiccuping. Every nerve in Elira's body screamed with warning. Her stabilizer spine grew hot. Rom gritted his teeth as blood trickled from one ear. Wick's hum deepened. The capsule breached the chronoshell. And time stopped moving forward. Everything outside vanished. Inside, the capsule began to shift, metal creaked in directions that violated stress logic. Interior panels vibrated against each other. Wick extended both arms and flattened them against the walls. The gesture wasn't functional. It was ritual. Rom closed his eyes. He mouthed a name silently. Not Elira's. Elira didn't blink. Through the view slot ahead, the impossible began to reveal itself. Below them, the surface of Orpheus 7 shimmered not as land or sea, but as a constantly rewriting topology. Cities appeared, flickered, and vanished. Forests bloomed and withered in a blink. Mountain ranges reshaped with each breath. One structure remained constant. A tower, black, smooth, taller than atmosphere should allow. It stretched from the continental center, piercing the sky like a needle in a frozen reel of film. Wick raised a hand and began drawing in the air with its finger. Trails of blue light followed. The symbol it traced was the same as before. Then, Elira felt it, deep behind her eyes. Recognition. They hadn't discovered Orpheus 7. They were returning to it. The capsule dropped toward the surface and time forgot them. The capsule impacted the surface of Orpheus 7 in silence. There was no tremor, no recoil, just an abrupt halt, as though the world had inhaled and held its breath. Instruments reported landing velocity at sublethal impact, but the data held no timestamp. Time had unthreaded. The hatch remained sealed, not by mechanical fault but by protocol. They had to wait for baseline neural alignment, 2 minutes subjective, no more. Inside the capsule, The team sat suspended in blue emergency lighting, every breath audible against the padded walls. Alira counted seconds by heartbeats. They did not match her pulse. She exhaled and reached to the side panel, engaging manual override. The hatch hissed and rotated open with mechanical slowness. Moisture collected along the inner seal, crystallizing into frost despite ambient temperature warnings. Orpha 7's atmosphere was classified as breathable, but every molecule carried age, memory, inertia. Light flooded the capsule, not from the sun, but from the sky itself. Above them stretched a dome of false daylight, its spectrum warped and chromatic, like an atmosphere trying to imitate itself. The light moved in slow motion, dragging shadows along the ground like liquid metal. Outside, the terrain was gray-gold and ancient. Dust drifted without wind. Spires of glassstone jutted from the ground in clustered rings, some intact, others collapsed into spirals. The landscape rearranged itself subtly as they watched. Patterns shifted, as if space reorganized its priorities when unobserved. Cracked plates of obsidian lay embedded like tectonic fossils. In the distance, a ridge of petrified coral twisted into an arc, partially buried beneath a thin crust of crystal ash. Wick stepped out first, its sensors fanning in radial bloom. The drone's feet left no imprint. Its chassis glinted with damp condensation, beads of fluid moving in unnatural directions, as if rejecting gravity. It paused briefly, then extended one arm toward the sky, mimicking the curve of the ridge as if measuring it against some forgotten standard. Alira followed, her boots crunching into dry surface layers that fractured like time-worn bone. She knelt briefly and touched the ground, solid, yes, but wrong. The texture defied memory. It felt like something she'd touched in a dream she could no longer recall. Rum came last, dragging a heavy pack of analog equipment sealed in redundant casings. His steps were careful, exact. He paused every few meters to scan, logging baseline entropy levels, atmospheric deviation, photon lag. His eyes scanned the horizon with distant calculation, but his shoulders were tight, held inward, armored with knowledge he could not yet voice. He froze briefly beside a half-buried structure. A faint scent reached him, ozone and metal polish. He blinked hard. For a moment, he could swear it was the corridor outside the chronovault containment chamber. "Is it the same as before?" Alira asked. Rum didn't answer immediately. He unholstered a field scanner, flicked a physical switch, and watched a roll of thermal paper begin spitting out lines of data. The lines curled into spirals as they printed, overlapping, warping. Different every minute. No event consistency. No topological memory. But the tower holds. They turned to look. On the horizon, the tower pierced the sky exactly as it had in orbit. Seamless, dark, vertical infinity. Its scale remained unknowable, close, and impossibly far at once. There was no atmospheric haze. No size context. It was just there. A scar on the planet's surface, immune to distortion. Between them and the tower stretched a broken city. It had no name, no pattern. Buildings twisted in on themselves, structures reversed direction mid-rise, walkways led to doors that vanished. No two sections looked built in the same century. Some glowed faintly as if recently inhabited. Others decayed in real time. In one square, children made of glass played in looping cycles, collapsing into dust and reforming seconds later. Wick began walking toward the city. "Wait!" Alira called. The drone stopped, its head tilted. Then it traced a circle in the dust with its foot. Inside it, a symbol identical to the one etched in the viewport. "Marking path," Rum asked. "Or warning," Alira replied. They followed. As they moved through the outer rings of the city, the ambient sound changed. It wasn't mechanical nor natural. It was as if memory itself was making noise, a low drone of forgotten thoughts vibrating beneath conscious hearing. At first, the structures seemed inert, but the longer they observed, the more alive they became. Window reflections shifted independently of light sources. Walls whispered. Entire blocks rearranged subtly while unobserved. What had been a collapsed transport line now arched over the skyline, intact and glimmering. A market appeared beside them. Not gradually, it was there. Food stalls, merchant stands, woven cloth overhangs, colors too bright, motion too fluid. Human faces, or near human. They moved, bartered, laughed. All on loop. 5 seconds. Reset. 5 seconds. Reset. Wick broke from formation. It approached one of the glass children, its arm slowly rising as if to reach out. But before contact, the child looped. Wick froze, then lowered its arm and returned without a word. They were relics of remembered time, stuck in playback. One figure turned to face Alira in the exact moment the loop restarted. For one frame, too brief to confirm, it did not reset. Her heart pounded. Wick stopped ahead. The drone had frozen mid-stride. Its arm raised, mimicking the motion of greeting. It stood like a monument, unmoving. "Alira," Rum said quietly, "you need to see this." She turned. Behind them, the landscape had changed. The capsule was gone. In its place stood a different version of the same city, larger, more ancient. The skyline had altered. The buildings now bore Terran architectural signatures, brutalist spires, concrete shells, industrial balconies overgrown with synthetic vines. Echoes of Earth displaced in chronology. Rum checked his recorder. It had reversed direction. Tape unwinding slowly. They were already drifting. Alira looked up. The false daylight above them had fractured, segmenting into ribbons of time, each showing a slightly different version of the same sun. One segment stuttered. Another flickered backward. Wick began to hum again. The sound was deeper now, pulsing. It aligned with nothing. A sudden burst of motion made Alira spin. A figure ran down an alley to their right. Humanoid. Uniformed. It didn't loop. It didn't vanish. It moved with intention. She gave chase. Rum shouted something behind her, but the world blurred. Every step stretched time. Every breath became a paragraph. The alley twisted. Gravity shifted. She emerged in a courtyard that hadn't existed seconds before. In its center stood a tree, massive, metallic, and leafless. Hanging from its branches were thousands of translucent objects. Photographs. Each one showed a different version of her face. Some were younger, some scarred. One wore the insignia of a council admiral. She stepped forward, and one of the images broke free, drifting toward her like a falling leaf. She caught it. The photograph was warm. It showed her standing beside someone, her brother, alive, smiling, a version of her life that had never happened. A crack split through her stabilizer spine. Pain lanced up her neck. The photograph burned away in her hand. Behind her, Rum finally arrived, panting. He said nothing, just looked at the tree. For a moment, his hand drifted to his coat pocket, where an old analog key hung on a chain. His fingers trembled, then withdrew. Then the sky went dark. Not from weather, from memory. A wall of city shifted across the skyline, blotting out the fractured light. Entire buildings fell upward. Streets unrolled. Sound collapsed into negative space. Wick's hum reached a crescendo, then stopped. The world reset. They stood once more at the city's edge. The capsule was gone. Wick stood facing the tower. Alira fell to one knee. Her fingers trembled. Her vision blurred. Rum placed a hand on her shoulder. "We're inside it now," he said. "Time's logic no longer applies." She didn't reply. Her mind was still clinging to the photograph that had never existed. Above them, the tower pulsed once. Then it began to change shape. A door appeared near its base, huge, sealed, bearing the hybrid glyph Wick had drawn. It was waiting for them. The door at the base of the tower did not open. It dissolved. No motion. No sound. One moment it existed, a vast, featureless plane of black alloy sealed tight, and the next, it had simply ceased to be. In its place, a corridor yawning inward, too long to measure and vanishing into a horizon that bent light. The glyph above the entry shimmered faintly. Then it dimmed. Wick entered without hesitation. Alira followed, stepping through an aperture that felt like crossing a pressure differential, not physical, but chronological. Her ears popped, her skin prickled, and for a moment her heart forgot its rhythm. She tasted something metallic and old. Dust mixed with ozone. A flavor remembered from her first battlefield oxygen mask, the stale rebreather air from Europa's trench domes. That taste returned now, unbidden and wrong. Rom crossed last, his hand never leaving the analog key beneath his coat. As he passed the threshold, he blinked hard just once and saw a corridor that no longer existed. Rusted steel walls, flickering halogen bulbs, blood pooled beneath a containment door marked with the chronovault seal. He clenched his jaw and looked forward. The corridor sealed behind them, not with doors, but with memory. When Alira turned to look, there was only seamless wall. Inside, gravity adjusted incrementally. The floor wasn't level, though it appeared so. They walked downward gently, constantly, into the structure's impossible depth. The corridor pulsed with faint phosphorescence. Its walls were not smooth but textured with geometric patterns that shifted if stared at too long. The symbols were not alien. They were human. Or had once been. Fragments of Earth's lost languages coiled among dead dialects of extinct colonies. Military sigils from regimes that never officially existed. Pictograms Alira had seen only once, buried in declassified black file reels labeled Temporal Containment Protocols, TIRNL. Rom slowed. He traced one symbol with his fingers, a spiral intersected by jagged slashes. His voice dropped to a whisper. Black Site Theta? They were building this long before it failed. Black Site Theta was destroyed, Alira said. No, Rom replied. It was sent here. They descended for another full kilometer. Their own shadows followed at inconsistent angles. Once, Alira looked down and saw her younger self reflected across the corridor floor, clean uniform, academy insignia, eyes untouched by loss. It vanished as she blinked. Something cold settled behind her sternum. The corridor widened. The walls expanded outward into a space that defied architectural scale. A chamber, a circular atrium filled with inverted towers, descending like stalactites from the ceiling, each ending in a metal cradle. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Each cradle was suspended by coiled support arms, mechanically intact, humming softly. Every cradle held a body. They were human. Suspended. Unaged. Asleep. Their faces matched no one on file. But their uniforms bore the unmistakable insignia of the Terran Outer Rift Expeditionary Forces, an entity decommissioned nearly a century ago after the collapse of the first contact mandates. Each figure was perfectly preserved. No decay. No cryogenic frost. Their pulse lights blinked in slow, asynchronous rhythm. Rom moved first. He approached one cradle, wiping away the thin layer of biofilm coating the viewport. A woman floated inside, her eyes closed, her expression blank. Yet her fingers twitched subtly as if reacting to dreams outside time. They're not frozen, Rom said. They're paused. Caught mid-thought. Neural stasis. Why would someone store soldiers inside a dead timeline? Alira asked. Rom's expression hardened. To prevent something from waking up. Alira stepped between the towers, her footsteps echoing strangely. The acoustics weren't linear. Each sound fragment rebounded in different directions, some immediately, some after seconds. Somewhere behind her, a whisper returned to her ears, something she hadn't said aloud. She passed a cradle that bore a name she recognized. Voss Arden? Her breath caught. Inside was a boy, no more than 16. Same jawline. Same eyes. Her brother. But not her brother. She reached for the cradle before stopping herself. His face twitched slightly in stasis. And she knew this wasn't a memory. This was a forked timeline sealed here to keep her from looking deeper. Wick climbed one of the support beams without instruction. Its claws moved with uncanny ease. It perched beside one of the higher cradles and extended a finger toward the occupant's temple. For a moment, nothing happened. Then it recoiled. Violently. The drone dropped to the floor, landed in a crouch and powered down. A heavy stillness fell. The sound in the atrium grew low and tense, like a breath being held. Alira rushed to its side. Wick's body was still warm. Faint vibrations ticked under its armor, subharmonic pulses not sourced from any internal motor. What just happened? She asked. Rom's face had gone pale. He stepped back, away from the cradle. They aren't just sleepers, he said. They're anchors. Temporal anchors. Each one is entangled with a causality thread, nodes in a network designed to hold this structure still. Like pins driven into a collapsing map. If they're disturbed. He didn't finish the sentence. Above them, one of the cradles cracked. Hairline fissures crept across the metal surface. Inside, the figure's eyelids fluttered. And the city outside shifted. Through the atrium's far wall, a window materialized. Or had always been there. It showed a view of the city from above, but different. Fires burned. Skies boiled. Structures collapsed and rebuilt themselves every few seconds. The sky had fractured again, but this time the divisions glowed red. Lightning forked upward instead of down. Reality itself was fighting to correct something. Elira's stabilizer spine pulsed red. Sharp spikes of pain lanced down her legs. Her HUD glitched, timestamps jittering, cross signals overlaying her retinas with scenes from old missions. Rom's tape recorder began to smoke. The analog components tried to rewind, eject, record all at once. He tore it from his belt and dropped it. It sparked once, then went still. Wick rebooted. The drone stood and raised its head. It spoke a single word, not through speakers but through Elira's neural feed. Awakened. The glyphs along the wall began to glow. One by one. Faster and faster. The language of containment, now activated, now resisting. The atrium floor rippled beneath their feet. Not an illusion, metal buckled and then corrected. The entire facility was flexing under a dimensional recoil. More cradles flickered. Some of the occupants stirred. Others vibrated in place, locked in partial motion. A low thrumming built in the structure. Not mechanical. Not seismic. Biological. Rom backed away from the nearest cradle, his hands raised in quiet horror. They weren't just storing memory, he said slowly. They were binding it. These soldiers, they're not protecting us from what's outside. Elira looked to him. They're protecting it from what we became. The glyph surged, then fractured. One cradle detached from the ceiling and dropped like a spear, embedding in the floor. Its occupants' eyes opened. They were completely white. Outside, the city began to scream. The sound wasn't air. It wasn't voice. It was architecture. The towers, the streets, the walkways, all of them crying out in harmonics that broke apart physics. The window shattered inward, though no glass flew. Just fragments of reality disassembling. Wick spun toward the far wall and extended its arm. It traced a symbol, one Elira had seen only once. A failsafe. Her spine flared again. Blood welled in her mouth. Rom, can we reseal it? No. Not from inside. Then we leave. There's nowhere to go. Outside the chamber, the corridor twisted, walls rotating in real time. The path behind them had collapsed into an endless feedback loop. Light poured from cracks in the floor. Footsteps echoed behind them, though no one followed. Elira grabbed Wick's shoulder. Interface. Show us the anchor point. Wick turned. Its blue eyes flickered, then narrowed. From its chest, a panel opened. A projection burst forth, a network of lines, threads, and pulses, all of them converging on a node far beneath the facility. A vault. The final lock. And at its center, a core of radiant white, a memory not yet corrupted. Not yet lost. A low tone rang out through the chamber like a countdown beginning. The converging lines began to pulse red. Then we go down, Elira said. And they ran. They descended through a spine of unraveling architecture, chased by echoes of themselves. Every corridor below the atrium was older, stranger, less committed to spatial logic. Walls arced inward or corkscrewed, stairs inverted their pitch. Gravity pulses shifted direction mid-step. Wick led with mechanical precision, unaffected by distortion. Elira followed, her stabilizer fighting against pulsing feedback. Rom moved last, his hand pressed to the wall, eyes glassy with vertigo. The deeper they went, the less the structure resembled construction. It became anatomy, skeletal beams like ribs, conduit arteries, paneling that flexed with breath. The walls vibrated at a frequency just beneath hearing, and Elira could feel it in her molars. Every surface seemed to resist observation. Symbols reappeared. Glyphs shifted mid-form. Some changed when no one looked. Elira recognized one, a spiral devouring itself, that she'd seen etched into the wreckage of the Dorian relay where an entire human outpost had vanished with all chronologues erased. Another was familiar from the Europa breach site, an impossible loop of cause and effect inscribed in melted steel. The air thickened. Breathing required conscious effort. Gravity shifted again, not in direction but mood. It felt heavier with every floor, as if the atmosphere itself remembered more than it should. Wick didn't pause. It scanned, pivoted, adjusted its gait as if it had walked this path before, centuries ago. At one corridor junction, they encountered motion, flashes of themselves, flickering across the hallway from alternate angles. Elira saw Rom moving ahead of her, but also behind her. Wick passed by itself in reverse. 1,000 iterations. Time began to fail. Is this still forward? Rom asked. Doesn't matter, Elira answered. We're heading toward the thing that remembers. Wick halted at a fork, 3 paths, each identical in design but not in resonance. Without prompt, it extended its arm and etched a symbol into the air. The symbol hovered briefly, then shattered. It doesn't know, Rom said, voice dry. Elira closed her eyes. A memory surfaced. training in the Martian ruins, trying to navigate a partially collapsed structure where time advanced unevenly. She'd learned to track by temperature gradients, temporal bleed heated structure points as compression increased. She raised her palm and fell. The left path was cold. The right was inert. The center burned. They entered the fire. The vault was not a room. It was a wound. The corridor ended abruptly in a precipice. Below them, a vertical shaft that pulsed like a throat. Floating stairs descended in spirals toward a structure at its base, part organic, part machine. Coils of dormant energy drifted around it like tendrils in a fluid. Every few seconds, the entire shaft pulsed outward, compressing time across the chamber. Wick paused at each pulse, recalibrating. The walls here were soft metal and fossilized bone. Bas-reliefs of extinct human futures covered the surface, cityscapes that had never existed, victories that had never been won, wars still waiting to happen. Elira traced one mural, an enormous human figure battling a creature of shadow across a field of fractured stars. The figure's face was hers. The core pulsed, white, blinding, steady. Not light. Memory. Elira descended first. Each step disrupted something in the air, dust patterns, motion trails, shadows that didn't belong to any of them. Her thoughts began fragmenting. Names lost meaning. Dates collapsed. For 2 seconds, she forgot her brother's face. Wick walked beside her now. Not ahead. Its head tilted with each step, mimicking organic curiosity. At one landing, it paused and looked straight at her. "You left this behind," it said. Its voice was her brother's. Elira stopped. The voice had been perfect, not simulated, not replicated. Remembered. Her stabilizer spine surged, then calmed. She kept moving. Rom caught up, shaking now. This place, this was never meant to be opened. Then why build it? Elira asked. Rom didn't answer. Instead, he pulled the analog key from beneath his coat and held it like a relic. They didn't build it to open. They built it to fail just once. At the base, they reached the vault. Its surface was mirror-smooth but not reflective. It absorbed identity. Standing before it, Elira felt smaller than she ever had, reduced to pattern, stripped of future. The vault structure resembled no known design. No seams, no hinges. It radiated an internal gravity well. Every motion near it felt chosen, like stepping into someone else's memory of you. Wick stepped forward and touched the surface. A seam appeared. The vault opened. Inside was a machine. It was human. Not in form, but in origin. Constructed from old Earth alloys. Marked with the emblem of the Temporal Assembly, the government body that had disbanded itself during the Chrono-Reformation. The insignia was etched in multiple overlapping versions, as if time itself had struggled to decide which variant belonged here. It was dying. Hollowed out. Half sunken into a cradle of cables. Its core glowed faintly, and through its chestplate, Elira saw a rotating prism, too complex for modern design, spinning through dimensions with each rotation. The machine was not inert. Its torso moved with shallow, hydraulic breath. The prism cast shadows that lagged behind present time. Its gaze, when it turned toward them, carried no malice. But it recognized them. Not as intruders. As echoes. Rom fell to one knee. He pressed his forehead to the floor, eyes shut, jaw clenched. For the first time since they landed, he whispered not data but prayer. Central seed, he breathed. It's the first one. The prototype. Of what? Elira asked. The machine that remembers. The one we modeled the vaults after. But this one, it's alive. Wick knelt before it. The machine raised its head. No motion. But its eyes opened. And every clock in the universe began to reverse. Their time-sync implants shorted. Internal chrono readouts flashed negative values. Elira's HUD blinked, then dissolved into static. Wick's chassis flexed, old programming overtaken by some external pulse. The vault itself folded open, walls spiraling out, revealing a deeper chamber. Inside were hundreds of glass canisters. Each one pulsed with faint light. Each one contained a person. Copies. Clones. Forks of lives and moments sealed in perpetual stasis. Rom staggered. These aren't survivors. They're memories made flesh. Counterweights to every possible collapse. Redundancies, Elira said. Insurance. Against ourselves. She stepped into the chamber. The machine's voice followed her, not audible but present. You are the last question. I was built to forget. You are the error that repeats. Wick walked beside her, hand outstretched toward a canister marked VOS / command, Alter 7. Her face stared back at her. The copy was older. Scarred. Dressed in full War Command armor. Her expression was one of absolute resolve. Elira turned to Rom. Do you remember sending this version of me here? Rom didn't answer. He couldn't. The chamber began to vibrate. Outside, the city pulsed again, collapsing in layered echoes. Time was folding. The machine had awoken, and it was trying to decide which pass to allow. Each canister was not just a backup. It was a branch waiting for selection. Wick turned toward the center. Its voice returned. Decision point approaches. Elira clenched her jaw and walked to the core. The core chamber expanded as she approached. Not physically, temporally. Every step widened the scale of her perception. The floor fell away, revealing concentric rings of moments stacked like sediment, each one flickering with the echo of decisions never made. Each ring held a world. She wasn't walking forward anymore. She was moving inward toward the center of all choices she had not taken. The air around her thickened. Time became viscous. At the center, the core pulsed faster. Wick stood beside her, silent now. Its head turned fractionally every few seconds, scanning realities layered against the walls. It no longer moved like a drone. It moved like something listening. The hum of its internal systems was gone, replaced by a breathless stillness that unnerved Elira more than anything so far. Behind them, Ram's breathing grew shallower. He pressed a hand to his chest, then fell to his knees. Elira turned, saw his eyes unfocused, his mouth moving in silent argument with some unseen force. The analog key in his fist glowed red-hot. Skin bubbled where it touched him. "Ram," she called, stepping toward him. He didn't hear. Or heard someone else. His lips whispered fractured phrases. Containment breach, fault line 7. Elira never made it out. The vault's pressure climbed. The chamber now pulsed in waves, memory converted into gravitational distortion. The glass canister aisles groaned with age and weight. Flickers of motion surged between them, clones twitching, awakening momentarily, looping gestures, eyes blinking in patterns that didn't match. One thrashed silently, its mouth open in eternal panic. Another calmly placed a hand against the glass and smiled. A selection must be made. The machine's voice came from all directions. Not spoken, inscribed in the space itself. The room quivered with each syllable. "I was built to decide what cannot be chosen." Elira turned to Wick. "What is it choosing?" Wick's faceplates reshaped slowly. A thin line opened across its forehead. Inside, the exposed neural mesh pulsed once, like a second heartbeat. Future inheritance. One continuity permitted. One must be locked. Others will collapse. She swallowed. How many versions of me are in here? Wick didn't answer. But the chamber did. The walls shifted. She saw them all, her alternate selves. One standing in a white void with a Terran war fleet behind her, face carved from stone, her hands stained. Another kneeling on an alien world beside the broken frame of a Wick unit, her mouth open in silent grief. One screaming against a glass wall as a planet died behind her, surrounded by static and fire. Another seated on a throne of circuitry in a darkened chamber, her eyes black, her skin marked with unknown sigils. Each version caught her eye for a second, each flickering into full presence, then fading. Wick approached a second canister. Voss / null prime. This Elira was younger. Unsure. Uniform stained. Face bloodied. Her fingers twitched with hesitation. Wick extended a hand but did not open it. "Course seeks resonance." Ram finally looked up. His voice was thin, dry, terrified. "They'll overwrite you. Whoever the machine selects becomes the only version that survives." Elira's jaw tightened. Outside, the city shook, buildings collapsing in slow-motion silence. The sky above flickered black, then white, then showed a memory of a blue ocean. The temperature dropped by 5 degrees in a breath. She turned back to the core. "If I refuse?" Wick responded instantly. Then time unravels. All moments return to uncertainty. Humanity ends as recursion. The core pulsed again. From the darkness beyond the chamber, a figure emerged. One of her. The one from the canister. Voss / command alter 7. She walked with mechanical calm. Her presence was absolute. Every step carried the weight of someone who had already survived 1,000 reboots. Her voice was identical. "You're not ready to carry this." "I already did." Elira froze. This version wore scorched command armor, deep gray with gold insignia etched in broken patterns. Her left arm was cybernetic but not modern. It moved like memory. Her right eye glowed faintly with a neural interface. She bore no weapons. She didn't need them. The chamber dimmed. 2 Eliras stood at the center. One born of choice. One born of memory. The core emitted a low tone oscillating between pain and invitation. Each heartbeat shook the structure. Along the edges of the chamber, entire canisters flickered out of existence. "Why me?" Elira asked. The alternate stepped forward. "Because you remember. That's the seed. Memory is more than recollection. It's alignment. If you forget who you are, the machine chooses for you. I didn't forget. You almost did. Elira clenched her fists. So what now? We fight. No. She opened her palm. We converge. The machine began to count down. Each pulse stronger. Each beat louder. 9. 8. Wick turned to face them, not one, but both. Its voice changed. It was no longer synthetic. It was hers. Choose. Rom screamed. His stabilizer spine flared red-hot, pouring data directly into his nervous system. The analog key disintegrated in his palm. Blood ran down his forearm, but he didn't feel it. His pupils dilated. He saw everything. Every version of Earth that failed. Every timeline overwritten. Every vault cracked open too early. And one where Elira died in the first second of contact. He whispered her name. Not the one in the room. Another one. One that never made it off Ganymede. He collapsed. Elira stepped forward. The two versions of herself stood face to face, their breathing synchronized, their neural implants blinking in mirrored tempo. Each moved a hand to her chest. Each nodded. I know who I am, said one. I know who I've been, said the other. Wick extended its hand. Synchronization complete. Integration permitted. The chamber lit. From all sides, light folded inward. Memories collapsed. Versions dissolved. The air rippled with heat and soundless pressure. Elira's skin flared, every scar and nerve alight. Her spine flexed against the stabilizer as identities merged. For a single second, she remembered all of them. And from within the light, a singular figure stepped forward. One Elira. Whole. The machine's core slowed. The pulse stabilized. The vault stopped vibrating. Outside, the sky turned gold. Rom blinked. He was lying on the floor. Wick stood over him. But it was different now. Taller. Alive. It extended a hand and helped him to his feet. She stood by the vault. Not a clone. Not a version. Elira. The last one. I remember everything, she said. She turned her head slightly. Even the taste of crushed orange ration tabs in the Ganymede bunkers. The way they stuck to your teeth. Wick bowed its head. Behind them, the chamber sealed. And all the other timelines were gone. The air above the vault had stilled. No more pulses. No more collapsing canisters. The entire structure breathed now like an organism relieved of pain. The stabilizer hum in Elira's spine faded into silence. Her internal chronometer reinitialized, ticking forward with perfect clarity for the first time in hours. The system had chosen. She stood beside Rom at the chamber threshold. Wick loomed behind them, no longer a drone, no longer a weapon, something older now. Not a machine repurposed, but a fragment returned. Its movements were slow, deliberate, reverent. They passed through the open aperture where the vault had once writhed with choice and recursion. No seals remained. The doorframe was intact, but stripped of symbols. The glyphs once pulsing with containment logic had been erased. Absorbed, accepted. Beyond the threshold, the city had changed again. Gone were the recursive towers and flickering shadows. In their place stretched a flat, glistening field of obsidian mirror glass. From horizon to horizon, it gleamed under a sky of endless white. A plane forged not of substance, but of memory in its final form, clean, clear, and waiting. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something older, like heated stone after rain. It was warm, dry, and impossibly still. The vault tower behind them had also transformed. What had once been a chaotic spiral of black alloy and temporal flux now stood still. A single, smooth column. Silent. Featureless. The last monument of a structure that had spent eons remembering. No wind. No birds. No noise but their breath. The firmament above was white and depthless, painted only with the silhouette of the tower's shadow, and laced with a low static hum like distant electricity arcing just beyond hearing. A soundless sound that made Elira's teeth ache slightly when she listened too long, stretched infinitely across the mirror field. It was not light that created this contrast. It was presence, the sheer gravitational memory of what the vault had been. Rum spoke first. This is inheritance logic. Elira turned. He pointed toward the horizon. Faint outlines stood there, humanoid figures motionless, scattered like monuments across the field. They weren't moving. They weren't alive. Statues of potential. Locked selves that would never awaken. They were all candidates, Rum said. The system archived them. It gave them death by preservation. "They're me," Alira said. "Versions that never came forward." She stepped onto the obsidian plane. The field accepted her weight without sound. Her reflection beneath moved in perfect sync, but her shadow stretched unnaturally long behind her, tapered like a wound still closing. She felt none of the resistance she had known in the vault. The space was not hostile, but it was not hers, not yet. Wick followed. Rum hesitated, then limped forward, still holding his side. His coat flapped loosely, scorched from the vault's awakening. The analog key was gone, and with it the last relic of control. He was just a witness now. They walked. The figures that surrounded them were arranged in no pattern. Each one was a different version of Alira. Some older, some younger, some visibly broken, others triumphant. One wore ceremonial armor inscribed with languages she couldn't name, kneeling beside a banner half consumed by ash. Another stood alone, soaked in something that might have been seawater or tears, holding a rifle pointed at the ground and a photograph clenched in her free hand. One wore the tattered black armor of a Terran warlord, face etched with rage. Another sat cross-legged, eyes closed, dressed in flowing cloth of a civilization Alira didn't recognize. One leaned against an invisible wall, exhausted, holding what looked like a child's drawing. Each statue captured a different future that could have been, but never would. Alira passed them without looking away. Their eyes were closed, but she felt watched. Not judgment, recognition. A farewell without words. At the center of the field stood a singular monolith, smooth, metallic, only a meter high. It bore no mark, no seam. Wick circled it once, scanning without speaking. The surface reflected nothing. Alira knelt. It wasn't just a monument. It was a seed. Her fingers touched its surface, and warmth pulsed beneath. A low hum vibrated through her bones, not mechanical, but biological. The hum of dormant genesis, the sound of an unclaimed thread of causality waiting to be pulled. Her neural feed received no data, no language, just invitation. It soothed her, like a voice she hadn't heard in years whispering her name in a forgotten room. Wick lowered itself beside her. The future is unwritten, but its boundaries must be held. Alira looked up. This rewrites everything? Wick responded with a gesture, both a nod and something else. A movement that wasn't learned, but remembered. Rum stood behind them, pale and gaunt. He looked up at the blank sky. "No stars," he muttered. "Not yet. It's waiting for her to plant them." Alira closed her eyes. Inside her mind, the seed opened like a bloom, and the flood of possible futures struck with overwhelming gentleness, like being submerged in warm water. For a moment, she felt fear at the scope of it all, but the fear faded, replaced by a solemn calm. The clarity of her path did not come from certainty, but from permission. She was not required to know everything, only to begin. A cascade of blueprints, not of machines or technology, but of decisions, branches of what might be, now condensed into a single root system. It was not a map of time. It was time reduced to soil. The weight of it didn't crush her. It made her aware of what she was choosing to carry. She reached into the seed, and it opened. Light without color filled the field. The statues shattered quietly, without dust. Each one fractured from the inside, breaking apart into streams of light that ascended into the sky. Where each had stood, a tiny ember remained, suspended a few centimeters above the surface. They did not flicker. They held. Wick stepped back. Rum covered his eyes, breath caught. The sky reacted, not with thunder, not with fire, with alignment. Lines formed above, geometry without shape, a logic lattice traced across the firmament. The mirror field beneath responded with perfect synchrony, each ember mapping to a point above, each reflection locking in. Alira stood slowly. She turned to Wick. "How do I begin?" Wick rose. "You already have. The system will build upon your integrity. The architecture will take form based on what you retain. What if I make the wrong future?" Wick tilted its head. "Then you will try again. But not from here. Not as another. As yourself." The field beneath them began to shift. Beneath Alira's feet, structure bloomed. Frameworks of light, then matter. Cities built from truth, not conjecture. Realities constructed from the surviving spine of human potential. Not one civilization, but 1,000 possible harmonies emerging all at once. Some were domes beneath oceans. Some were vertical megastructures spinning in low planetary orbit. Others lived inside stars. Each bore a trace of her memory. Each carried the logic of inheritance. From turn to go. He looked older now, not just in body but in posture, as though a long-held burden had been finally acknowledged. He paused, glancing once over his shoulder. Not at Alira, but at the mirrored field, the seed, the constellations that had not yet formed. His lips parted slightly, as if to speak, but he said nothing. Whatever hope or regret he carried, it remained his alone. Eyes hollow, hands empty. "You won't need me for this part," he said. Alira caught his arm. "You gave me the key." He nodded once. "Don't waste the door." Then he walked back toward the tower, the last man who remembered the time before memory ruled. As he passed through the white field, his outline blurred slightly, as if even the air had begun to forget him. Wick remained at her side. Alira stared at the forming constellations overhead, no longer random, no longer silent. She raised a hand. The seed pulsed again. And in the mirror sky, the first star appeared. Alira held her breath without realizing it, a tremor running down her arms. Her skin prickled, the faintest rise of goosebumps along the back of her neck, as if her body had felt the shift before her mind could grasp it. She drew a breath. It tasted like citrus powder, sharp, synthetic, and oddly sweet. The taste of crushed orange ration tabs in the Ganymede bunkers. A memory she thought she'd lost. She smiled. The star she placed in the sky did not shine. It waited. Suspended in the white void, it cast no light. Not until others came. And one by one they did. From the seed, from her breath, from memory itself. Each appeared not as fire, but as confirmation. Not suns, but anchors, fixed points around which the new could begin. The mirror field fractured with growth. Not destruction, but differentiation. The uniformity broke first in geometry, lines segmenting into boundaries, frames, scaffolds. Then came matter. Soil took root without weight. Atmosphere thickened from stillness. The horizon receded. The sky remained white, but shadows now moved across it. Shapes of future satellites, orbital rings, scaffolding frameworks born from thought alone. The stars above did not twinkle. They held firm, silent, and deliberate. Each new one Alira summoned came with a pulse in her chest, a brief flash of memory. Her mother's voice at night, the cold edge of a cryolatch, Wick's silhouette in firelight. Wick moved ahead, no longer scanning, no longer guarding. It cleared space with each step as if drawing rooms into being. Its posture changed, taller now, with arms held differently. The angles of its limbs had softened. No longer military, not machine, something between. Behind it, cause followed effect. Cities grew in conceptual clusters, no grids, no repetition. Towers of mirrored stone rose without effort, anchored by moments from Alira's life. Each building held a narrative root. One skyscraper unfurled from a childhood drawing she'd once made in the margins of an old combat briefing. Another formed around the cadence of her father's footsteps in the corridor before deployment. Alira walked barefoot across the forming earth. Not because she wanted to, but because her boots had dissolved. Everything unnecessary fell away. Her feet pressed into soil that remembered weight. Felt warm, slightly spongy. The terrain responded to her balance with a near-conscious yield. Around her, air thickened, not oppressive but tactile. Wind returned in gentle spirals, smelling of old forest ash and orbital steel. The atmosphere tasted faintly of copper and sap. She drew breath and it lingered. Birdsong came next, not in sequence, in fragments, the echo of ecosystems reasserting themselves. From the ruins of the city, a new structure rose. Not tall but deep, not built but remembered. A chamber beneath the ground, lit by the reflection of stars that had not yet fully formed. It was shaped not by architecture, but by recollection. Its walls formed from the weight of memory, its corridors aligned with the geometry of grief. She descended into it alone. Each step into the darkened stairwell resonated with an ache behind her ribs. She heard echoes of rain on shuttle glass, of breathing masks, of silence between gunfire. The descent grew colder. Walls formed from rock embedded with the silhouettes of forgotten comrades. Their faces didn't look at her, but she felt their recognition all the same. At the chamber's core was not silence. It was heartbeat, slow, regular, mechanical, human. A pod waited at the center of the chamber, sealed, intact. Not from the vault, not from the machine. This one was hers. The one they had sealed long ago when they first arrived. Wick's memory stabilized the site, but she had forgotten it. The walls around the pod hummed with protective logic, layers of containment made from neural signatures and low-frequency promise. Unlike the containment vaults, this was not a prison. It was a cradle. She approached. Inside, she saw herself. Not older, not younger, not alternate. Her, the original. Hair longer, skin pale, face unscarred. Lips parted slightly in a breath that never finished. Her body lay in fluid, suspended between heartbeat and command. Her eyes flickered behind closed lids, trapped in memory, not sleep. Wick stood at her side, head bowed. This is the anchor. Alira looked down. Why is she still here? Because you needed to survive before you could return. She never woke up, but she never stopped existing. She is not the seed. She is the soil. Alira placed her hand on the pod's surface. A ripple of static moved across it, not rejecting, not accepting, waiting. She was the version I forgot, Alira whispered. The one that began all of this. Wick responded without motion. The version you became through choice is not the end. She is the foundation. You are the shape. A quiet fell. The heartbeat slowed. Alira closed her eyes. She pressed her forehead to the pod, the cool surface grounding her. For a moment, she heard her own voice, quiet, terrified, recorded from long ago. If I don't come back, tell them I tried. She opened her eyes. Her breath caught. A single tremor passed through her body as she looked into her own face. Undisturbed, untouched by the recursion, resting at the end of a promise. For a heartbeat, she wanted to recoil. For another, she wanted to weep. But neither came. The pod opened. Mist vented outward, luminous and thin. Inside, the body stirred. Fingers twitched. Eyelids fluttered. For a second, the two Aliras saw one another. One standing, the other rising. One awake, the other awakening. No alarms. No countdown. Just recognition. Alira reached down. The original took her hand. And the world began again. Two heartbeats. One returning, one remembered. Found rhythm. Memory no longer chose direction. It built upon itself. Above, the stars held. Around the seed, the cities expanded. Not as dominions, but as stories. Every wall a retelling. Every roof a declaration. None were perfect. None were symmetrical. But all were alive. The air filled with breath. Wick stood atop the ridge above the chamber entrance. Watching. No longer keeper. No longer soldier. Something else. It turned its head toward the sky and waited for the next one. Far off, across the white horizon, something shifted. A shape in the light. A breath not yet drawn. The light that poured into her lungs was not oxygen. It was memory rendered breathable. It entered as a hush, a slow flood of impressions, not sights or sounds but remembered textures, the friction of combat gloves on trigger steel, the ache behind her eyes in 0G. The lullaby rhythm of her mother's voice before sleep took her beneath Europa's frostline. Each inhalation was not survival, it was inheritance. Alira rose beside herself. Not a mirror. Not a twin. Two versions converged, one born in recursion, the other in stillness. They stood together at the mouth of the chamber, barefoot, silent, watching the horizon bend. Between them passed no confusion, no shock, only a quiet, unified recognition. They had been many things. Now they were whole. Where the cities had grown, roads now unfurled ribbons of possibility connecting towers like nerves. Some ran straight to the edges of visible terrain. Others arced high into the upper atmosphere, disappearing into new orbital frameworks being constructed in real time by satellites that had never been launched. The terrain shifted slowly, alive with thought. Grass unfurled across shallow basins. Riverbeds remembered paths etched in dreams and began to trickle with slow, silver current. Above them, stars moved into precise, deliberate alignments. No constellations. No patterns of old. Just presence. Just purpose. Each one flickered only once, anchored not by mass, but by relevance. Each star was a truth held onto long enough to shape something. Wick joined them on the rise. It carried no weapons. No tools. Its hands were empty. It had changed again. Its body bore traces of both machine and mind. Vines of polished memory alloy ran across its arms like tendon lines. One eye glowed softly, the color of early sky. The other had gone dark, not broken, but surrendered. Its stance mirrored Elira's, grounded, upright, balanced. They did not speak. The world was not waiting for orders. It was listening. Behind them, the seed pulsed once more. It rippled with low-frequency resonance. Not a hum, but a note in her blood. From it rose a tower of light, and within that tower came the threshold. It did not arrive, it resolved. A structure like a gate, but not mechanical. Not architectural. A span of light bound in gravity and intent. It shimmered with paths not yet taken, probabilities braided like muscle, curving gently around one another like living equations. It was not a doorway. It was an offering. The surface reflected nothing. But within its frame, movement. Tom slowed in its center. Elira glimpsed glimpses, cities not yet born, names not yet spoken, peoples she had never met standing in reverence beneath unfamiliar moons. One moment showed a child holding something small and glowing, a language cube, and laughing. Wick turned. To cross it is not to leave. It is to become. Elira stepped forward. The other followed. They passed Wick in silence. The drone bowed its head, not in deference, but solidarity. As they neared the threshold, the earth beneath their feet changed. The soil hardened, not with resistance but with readiness. Pebbles aligned. Grass flattened. Each step forward peeled away layers of noise from their minds, residual voices from failed timelines, impressions that no longer served. What remained were core truths. Grief. Curiosity. Defiance. Love. At the foot of the gate, both Eliras paused. They reached for one another, not in hesitation, but in acceptance. One breath. One shared heartbeat. They stepped into the light. They did not vanish. They expanded. Thought bent space around them. Light warped. Sound diffused. From the ridge, Wick watched. Its internal system spiked with an emotion it had no word for. If it had breath, it might have held it. The threshold remained open for 9 seconds. Then it folded. The gate did not close. It became part of the horizon. And Wick turned away. It descended from the ridge, alone now. Its steps traced the edge of a new river. The city pulsed in the distance, silent, breathing, real. Children would one day walk its halls, never knowing the recursion that preceded them. They would plant gardens where simulations once failed. They would speak languages born from the breath of survivors. In a memory not yet written, someone would ask where the stars came from. And someone would answer. From the ones who remembered. Time did not pass. It yielded. In the moment Elira crossed the threshold, the universe flexed, not in violence, but in allowance. The architecture of causality bent without breaking. A single filament of space stretched around her presence like cloth draped over a memory. The fabric of existence gave way not to power, but to integration. 9 seconds. That was the span. And in that span, an entire history unfolded. The field within the threshold was not a place. It was a field state, an intersection of potential and realization. Light behaved differently here. It bent without scattering, passed through matter without consequence. Heat did not rise, but hovered. Shadows did not follow form. They obeyed significance. Elira's breath became part of the continuum. Her pulse established a rhythm, and time, lacking a more dominant signal, adopted it. The convergence of herselves, the recursive and the preserved, formed an event horizon around which continuity could crystallize. What followed did not happen. It resolved. A continent unfurled like a muscle flexing through stone. It was not generated. It was remembered from maps Elira had studied, from mythic landscapes recounted by dying crew in deep-field mebays. Archipelagos took shape where grief had once settled. Forests grew first in places where she had bled. In the sky, clouds layered like breath over scar tissue. Their movements weren't random, they followed emotional thermals, drawn to regions of former loss, now seated with stability. Wick's form was embedded in one of the first foundation nodes. Not as overseer, not as sentinel. It became a relay, its memory field opened wide, freely accessed by the growing world. Creatures that emerged near it learned to mimic its stillness. Their eyes blinked in binary patterns. Communication returned, but not as signal. Language was grown, not taught. Glyphs emerged on canyon walls, in tree bark, in the sediment of riverbeds. They were not letters. They were impressions, emotional gradients encoded into texture and light. Entire philosophies could be felt with a palm pressed to the right stone. Children born in the post-threshold world did not speak as their ancestors had. Their syntax was harmonic, shaped by the rise and fall of biological feedback. They did not question what had come before because they carried it in marrow. And those who carried the deepest memories began to walk with metal limbs. The cities adjusted. Buildings reoriented with every generational cycle, not for efficiency but resonance. Structures pulsed with faint electro-organic rhythms, syncing with the citizens who lived inside. Towers leaned toward growing populations. Libraries expanded when questions outnumbered answers. In the heart of the plains, the Temple of Fracture was built not as worship but as acknowledgement. Its walls bore no text, only a single timeline etched in descending rings, each thinner, tighter, faster. At the center was a point that could not be reached because it no longer needed to exist. That point was Elira. Outside the cities, the wilderness thrived. It did not compete. It rejoined. Ruins of the recursion were left untouched. The people of the new era walked among them not as archaeologists, but as inheritors. They placed offerings, bits of light, small woven data strands, tokens made of polished black glass at the bases of collapsed towers. These were not tributes. They were acknowledgments. You were once possible. Now you are part of us. Animals once lost to pattern collapse returned. Antlered quadrupeds with optic-line fur, skyfish that flickered in and out of visibility, scavenger birds whose wings whispered old broadcast tones. Each creature bore the fingerprints of the recursion, but none were corrupted. A child left a toy carved from drift glass at the foot of a half-sunken monolith. She whispered her name, then Elira's. No one had taught her that second name. She simply knew. The vault closed. It did not seal. It ceased. Its presence remained in historical record, but the mechanisms that had kept it alive had decayed into irrelevance. Memory now existed outside the box. Elira's integration had made recursion unnecessary. There was no longer a loop. There was only braid paths woven together, allowed to diverge and reconnect. Wick's role changed again. It left the foundation node. Took form again. Not humanoid. Something else, taller, shaped by function yet untouched by design. It moved not by propulsion but by timing, appearing where it was needed. It was no longer singular. Others began to mimic it, first unconsciously, then in practice. Entire generations followed its path, not as creed, but as rhythm. Wick did not lead. It tuned. Elira no longer stood in any one place. Her form dissolved gently into distributed presence. She became echo, not a ghost, but a repeatable truth. Every time a new child carved a glyph, Elira blinked. When someone stood atop a hill and watched dawn with deliberate patience, she breathed. The star she had first placed still hung in the sky, unchanged. But now it was accompanied by a field, a constellation that made no pictures, only patterns of alignment. Across every biome, beneath every skyline, a person could stand still, raise their eyes, and feel her in the balance between stars. A faint warmth behind the eyes. The sense that someone had just exhaled nearby. A ritual began. Once every cycle, those born since the threshold would gather in the first city. They would walk barefoot across the seed field where the mirror glass still lay embedded in earth. They did not speak during this time. They listened to the air, to the soil, to the humming beneath their skin. At the center of the field, they placed a stone. Each stone bore no name, but all of them remembered hers. The final piece resolved. A structure grew at the edge of perception, visible only when looked at through memory. It was not physical. It was narrative. A building made of event density. In it, rooms existed in story logic. One led to the same place from every direction. Another shrank as one aged. Inside, a single chair waited. No one ever sat in it. They didn't need to, because Elira was already there. Continuity stabilized. The threshold became folklore. The recursion became metaphor. Time moved forward not because it had to, but because it was ready. The stars aligned one final time. The world paused not in fear, but reverence. And across every system, every breath, every memory still carried forward, one truth remained. Humanity did not survive because it was strong. It endured because it remembered.